Welcome to Monobiology. Today we're going to look at hormones and the various pathways that they take, both in regulation of themselves and to maintain homeostasis. For starters, let's take a look at the two different types of hormones that are present within animals. The first type is a water-soluble, or as we've heard this term before, hydrophilic hormone. And it is essentially made up, generally speaking, is made up of amino acids. So it's a protein hormone, okay? It's a protein hormone that's designed to be soluble in water. An example, two examples actually, are insulin and epinephrine. Epinephrine is the more commonly used name in science anyway for adrenaline, which everybody has heard of before. So insulin and epinephrine or adrenaline are two examples of water-soluble hormones. The other type are lipid-soluble or hydrophobic hormones. Steroids are one example. Now, I know that term has a negative connotation, but realistically, the steroid hormones, like cortisol, like testosterone, like estrogen, are just a type of hormone, okay? So, yes, steroids are bad, don't take them, but we do actually produce our own steroid hormones as well, and just have to keep that in mind. Now, these hormones down here are classified as amines. I'm sure you can see why. Remember that an amino group is an NH2. So you can see that one there and that one there. So these are amines. These are water soluble, and these are water insoluble or hydrophobic, lipid soluble proteins. Okay? Now that we've introduced the two different types of hormones, we're going to look at the pathways that they take. Okay, so here you see the two different pathways that are available, one for each of the different types of hormones. So we started off talking about the water-soluble hormones. Okay, so these ones go directly, I shouldn't say go directly, take a look at what's happening here. Okay, this process here you have a vacuole or a vesicle, it's releasing the contents. That's exocytosis. Why would it need to use exocytosis, you ask, Mr. Monahan? And the simple answer is because they're proteins, and we know that proteins don't fit through the cell membrane. They're too big, and they're too charged. So exocytosis is required. They go out, they go into the blood, they travel down the blood, they get to the receptor on the target cell, and they can, at that point, have one of two responses. They can either directly affect something that's already in the cytoplasm to cause a change in that cell, or they can influence the gene regulation of that particular process or that particular cell. Okay, so in other words, they can control the production of other proteins. That's what that means. Now, a couple of terms here really quickly. You've got your secretory cell in both of these pathways. Those would, generally speaking, in these cases, be the endocrine cells. Whatever gland is releasing these hormones, that would be the type of cell. So if this was like the pituitary, this would be a pituitary cell that would be releasing this hormone. Okay, so if this was the testes, this would be the testes, a testes cell that's releasing these, or the ovaries. Okay, you get the idea. These are the cells that are releasing the hormone. They're called the secretory cells. These cells down here are called the target cells. Why? Because the hormones are acting on these cells, causing a change, causing a reaction in these cells that's going to make something happen to help regulate the body somehow. Okay? Now, notice one other key difference here before we get too far. Notice that this protein hormone binds to a receptor molecule. This ligand binds to a receptor molecule. Over here, that does not happen, nor is exocytosis used. Okay, so this is the water-soluble. Exocytosis through the blood, binds to a receptor, either affects the activity of an enzyme or protein already produced, or causes a protein or enzyme to be produced. Okay, one of the two. Lipid-soluble hormones are a little bit different. Notice here, no exocytosis. They diffuse. Why do they diffuse? Well, as you guys know, lipids, phospholipids, they like each other. They go through. Works out pretty nicely for them. Okay, so they diffuse through. They don't need to use active transport. They like each other. They go right through. They go through the blood. Notice there's a transport protein here. Now, why would that be? Recall, ladies and gentlemen, that the blood is mostly made up of water. These are lipid-soluble hormones. They don't like water so much, so they need somebody to carry them through the bloodstream. That's why those are required. However, once they get to the target cell, look, they have easy access right in. Now, on the inside of the nucleus, there is a signal receptor. That signal receptor is going to then cause the production of an mRNA transcript, which is then going to be produced into a protein. Notice that lipid-soluble hormones always cause a protein to be made, whereas these guys sometimes cause a protein to be made, but sometimes they just act to activate a protein that's already been made. Now here's a question for you, and I want you to think about this and bring your answer to class. Which one of these two pathways, the water-soluble or the lipid-soluble, is going to be faster? Which one of these is going to react faster in our bodies? Think about it. Hormones also have regulatory pathways. We've talked about these before. There's two examples of regulatory pathways. There's a negative feedback loop. Okay, that's the example where the production of a particular response causes the whole pathway to turn off. Okay, so in other words, we start off with a stimulus, in this case low pH. All these things happen. The endocrine cell releases the hormone into the bloodstream, goes to the target cell, which causes a response. And then once that response is done, the stimulus, the endocrine cell shuts off, and no more of the hormone is produced. Negative feedback. Okay, it's your thermostat. Thermostat reaches the particular temperature. You don't need any more heat, so the furnace shuts off. Negative feedback. Positive feedback. Not as common, and also not very, generally speaking, not very good for homeostasis. Okay, because homeostasis is a regulation of the normal. You want to bring everything back to where it should be. Positive feedback doesn't tend to do that. It tends to keep going and going and going. It's like the thermostat saying, hey, I'm up to the temperature, furnace, keep cranking up the heat. And then the temperature keeps going up and up and up. Generally not good for homeostasis. However, it is necessary for certain processes. And here's one here that we've talked about before. The baby suckles. That causes a response here. The hypothalamus then tells the pituitary to release oxytocin, which then comes down here, acts on the target cell, which is in the smooth muscle of the breast, which then causes the milk to be released, which then of course causes the baby to suckle more, which then has the process happen all over again. Okay, so that example works for positive feedback because we want the baby to get more milk. Right? It's not going to affect the mother's homeostasis very much. It's just going to give the baby more milk, and that's a good thing. So, two different regulatory pathways for hormones. Generally speaking, though, for homeostasis, negative feedback is the one we want to worry about. This one here, not as common, certainly not going to bring you back to homeostasis very often. In terms of homeostasis, in our bodies, because hormones generally cause a particular effect, generally hormones come in pairs, okay? And generally speaking, they come in pairs because they're antagonistic to one another. That means that they have opposite effects. Okay, so here's a really good example. We have insulin, which we know lowers our blood sugar, okay? So you start off here, the stimulus is blood glucose level goes up. The pancreas says, whoa, wait a minute. What the heck is going on? No, that's not right. Releases the insulin. okay, which causes two things. Causes the liver to store glucose and turn it into glycogen, and causes your cells to take in more glucose, thus lowering the blood sugar levels, bringing us back to normal. Homeostasis. But what about if the blood sugar level goes too low? Well, insulin's not going to help there, so we have to have a different hormone that helps us with that. That's antagonistic. It has the opposite effect of insulin. So the stimulus here is blood glucose levels go down. The pancreas says, that's not good, man. Releases not insulin, but glucagon. Glucagon tells the liver to break down glycogen and put glucose back into the blood. Blood glucose levels rise, and yay, we're back to homeostasis. And folks, that in a nutshell is how hormones and pathways help regulate homeostasis.